Hey, you may have heard us talking about this story of U.S. Representative Gregory Meeks scolding immigration officials for daring to question a Muslim scholar whose nonprofits have now been linked to financing terrorism. The Queens Democrat contacted federal agencies, finally appealing to then Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff, asking why Anwar Hajjaj faced unwarranted scrutiny when he returned to the United States from trips abroad through JFK Airport. Meeks described Hajjaj as a highly regarded professor of Islamic studies who leads Friday Muslim prayers at the Capitol. He said that the guy was a pioneer in distance-based learning of Islam through the American Open University in Virginia, according to a copy of the September 30th, 2006 letter to Chertoff, which was obtained by the Post under the Freedom of Information Act. But the Post has learned that Hajjaj also headed the Taliban, not the Taliban, but the Taliban International Aid Association, a charity that has been accused of funding Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. Oh, well, we thought we'd invite Chuck Morse on. He's a veteran radio talk show host and syndicated columnist, regularly featured on WorldNet Daily for his columns, and he happens to be on the line with us talking about this. Chuck, how are you?
Very well, Phil. Thanks for inviting me.
It's my pleasure. So when you're looking into this guy, I mean, how deep an involvement does Gregory Meeks have with this guy, and could he not have known that this guy was linked to terrorism?
Well, Gregory Meeks is a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which has direct links with the International Socialist Movement, and they seem to be awfully squishy when it comes to helping Islamic fundamentalists and those who sympathize with them enter the United States legally, whether it's to visit briefly or over the long term. And it's a phenomenon that should trouble all of us. If Mr. Meeks wants this man to come into the country legally and visit, then he needs to stand up in the well of Congress and personally sponsor a trip for him. And then if the State Department objects to that, then which they probably would not, then he should come in. But to be there and complain about the fact that our men and women are doing their jobs in customs and at the airports and at embassies with regard to doing due diligence with over anyone who enters the country legally is really very specious. And all I can say is that Mr. Meeks might think twice about that next time he gets on an airplane.
Yeah, no kidding. So is this guy the only one, Meeks? I mean, are there other folks who have been in cahoots with some of these folks who have ties to I guess we can't call this guy really a terrorist, but he has had ties to terrorism. Is that right?
Well, yes, he has had direct ties with terrorism. I mean, he has supported and aided organizations that are connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. And the problem is actually much more systemic than that. There have been reports recently, including one by Frank Gaffney, who's a respected national security advisor and writer, that members of the Muslim Brotherhood are in most, if not all, major American Muslim organizations at this time. And the Muslim Brotherhood, of course, is covered in my book, The Nazi Connection to Islamic Terrorism. During World War II, they served as a Nazi spy network in the Middle East. They continue to receive funds that have been confiscated from Jews who were sent to the death camp, what was called the Sonder Fund, through their main contact and liaison in Nazi Germany, that being Amin al-Husseini, who sent those funds to the Muslim Brotherhood to help them build an international structure. And those funds continue to pour into their coffers decades after the end of World War II through Swiss bank accounts. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood has outlets in over 22 countries around the world, and they've made major inroads inside the United States. But, of course, when they're operating inside the United States, they do not engage in open, bloody jihad against the infidel. Instead, they use more subtle tactics. They use what's called taqiyya in Islamic tradition, which is that it's okay to lie, it's okay to deceive, and to pretend you're something else when you're in a non-Muslim country, when you're in the Dar el-Esab, which is what Islam refers to as the part of the planet that has not yet submitted to radical Islam. That's us.
Yeah.
And so we need to be very careful about who we invite into this country. We have every right as a sovereign nation, just like you and I have the right as owners of homes or livers in apartments, to decide who comes into our home. It's a basic function of any sovereign state, and it makes common sense.
It does, and I think it's fascinating, your book, The Nazi Connection to Islamic Terrorism, that a lot of people don't know that there is that connection. But something that we've been grappling with, I think, as Americans, is this whole thing about Muslims in general. And I know some Muslims, and I know some Muslims that are perfectly great people, peaceful people. The question is, how do we tell the difference between the peaceful ones and the ones that want to do us harm when they have this, or at least some of them have this code of where they can lie and deceive and everything else? Do you think that there are peaceful Muslims in the United States?
I think that most Muslims in the United States are peaceful Muslims. They're moderate. What I would say to them, and I know them as well, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is a regular guest on my show, and he heads up an American Muslim organization. But the issue that I brought up with Dr. Jasser and with other moderate Muslims in America is that they really have broken from the faith, whether they want to admit it or not. They are no longer interpreting Islamic law as it literally was meant to be interpreted. Instead, they've decided to look at concepts like jihad as, internal growth and internal development, which is a very Western concept. But that is not what jihad is, not what it ever was, nor is it what it is for most conventional Muslims in the world. It's bloody war. It is conquest of the entire planet. It is a political act. The Muslim is commanded to subdue the planet. And this is exactly what we're dealing with. So I ask moderate Muslims in the United States to disavow the part of the Quran that calls for violence against the infidel, against Jews, against Christians. I call them to disavow that doctrine, but they won't, because they know that if they do, they're going to be completely excommunicated from Islam. They should be. They should declare a new religion. They should take the moderate aspect of Islam and turn it into an American religion and discard the radical part of the faith. And to criticize this radical part is no different than having criticized Nazism. And when one criticized Nazism, that didn't mean they were against Germans. It didn't mean you're anti-German. So we need to criticize, we need to identify the nature of the enemy we face, and we need to ask moderate Muslims to side with us and to disavow those violent doctrines.
We're talking with Chuck Morse, and he's a syndicated columnist and a talk show host. About this issue and his book, by the way, which is, I guess, is out now, The Nazi Connection to Islamic Terrorism. Yes, available in all major bookstores. Okay. Now, this organization, the World Assembly of Muslim Youth International, or WAMY, W-A-M-Y, this was founded by bin Laden's nephew, according to this New York Post thing. And this organization is, I believe, is this one of the organizations, I believe, named as defendants in some of these civil suits filed by the families of the victims of 9/11?
That's right, and they're directly connected, again, with an international network that is Muslim Brotherhood, a very secretive network, one that does view and openly the idea of international order under Islam, that they feel commanded to conquer the world. The Imam of the Ground Zero Mosque is part of this, Faisal Roof. He refuses to, for example, disavow Hamas publicly. He was asked on the New York radio program recently to do so and refused to do that. And he does openly and unabashedly call for Sharia law in the United States. And that is not something that we in America want. That does not resonate with our democratic principles. I mean, they will execute homosexuals, for one thing. They'll execute apostates. They demand dhimmi status if they take over for those who are not Muslim. These are not ideas that resonate here. And I wonder, where is the left? Where is
I want to ask you that, Chuck. I mean, why is it that we have the left cozying up to radical Muslims who are against everything they stand for? I mean, they oppress women, they execute gays, they do all these things that in an ordinary world the left folks in this country would be just outraged about. But for some reason, I guess the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I mean, they feel like these radical Muslims are against America, and so they're against America too, the radical left. And so maybe that's why they're in cahoots with him. But this Meeks guy, I mean, we were talking about this World Assembly of Muslim Youth International that's now one of these organizations named as defendants in the ongoing civil lawsuits filed on behalf of the families of the 9/11 victims. And this guy that he was defending, that he said to leave the guy alone, is the director of this thing. And so Meeks is bound to know that this guy is involved in an organization that supports terrorism. Yet he not only does he not look the other way, he openly goes and supports this guy and tries to get the government off his back.
Well, I mean, he knows better than you and I know, probably. I mean, he has access to more information than we have And I don't mean to impugn the integrity of most liberals in this country, most people who lean left. I think that they're unwitting. I think that they are left because they think it's fashionable, because it's trendy, because all the beautiful people are on the left. They have no idea what they're doing. But people like Meeks and people on the real hard left and people who are witting, they do resonate with Islam for political reasons because they've always resonated with authoritarian faiths. It's the same group of people that resonated with communism after the end of World War II and admired Stalin. And even before, there was a brief period where they admired Adolf Hitler as well.
Right.
They are involved in this. They have a similar belief system, which is political control over others. Sharia law controls all aspects of the individual's life,
and they like that. They like the control. And look, we had this Finnish environmentalist that is calling for the eco gulags. I'm sure you've seen that story. And then then we had the report out. I believe a government report or from these generals and ex-generals now saying that Sharia law is one of the biggest threats to America out there. And so Sharia, and this is what the whole thing with the mosque. I don't want to get into the whole political thing of that. I have a hard time telling somebody that's that owns land and has a religion that they can't build something. But if we find out that they're involved in something like Sharia law and fomenting terrorism and things like this, that's where we go after these folks, is when they're going across that line of legality. And it sounds like to me the folks who are behind this so-called Ground Zero mosque are in cahoots with the terrorists, if not terrorists themselves. Would you agree with that?
I think they're in cahoots with the terrorists, for sure, and we don't know where the funding is coming from. We know that in Islamic tradition, this would be viewed as a victory mosque. You and I both are concerned with private property rights, so we're sort of stuck in a hard place here. And I don't in any way claim that they don't have the right to build a mosque. I would ask them not to build a mosque for proprietary reasons. It's like building a statue of Adolf Hitler across the street from the synagogue.
Right.
Where is their basic respect?
Yeah, you're allowed to do it, but you shouldn't.
Exactly. I mean, where is their basic compassion and humanity? And to hear Muslims say, well, we want to go and pray there, there are over 100 mosques in Manhattan, including one that is near Ground Zero already. Why there? I mean, it is really a disgrace, and they should be deeply ashamed of having to do this, to desecrate that area. Because, I mean, after all, obviously the 19 hijackers that blew up buildings that day, they were radical Muslims. They were believing fundamentalist Muslims, and there's no way around that.
That's right. Well, you can learn more about the Nazi connection to Islamic terrorism in Chuck's book, Chuck Morris, The Nazi Connection to Islamic Terrorism, available wherever fine books are sold. Chuck, appreciate the insight, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Anytime.
All right.